Excited to have so many of you here today.
Live on Facebook, yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, we'll have a few minutes here while everyone is signing in and joining us. But for those of you who are already signed on, please go ahead and open up the chat box and introduce yourself to the group. You can say your name and where you're calling from in the traditional territory. If you know where you reside, that would be wonderful. We will also be using the Q&A box to ask questions today. So we'll use both the chat and the Q&A box. Chat is specifically for communicating with the other participants, and the Q&A box is if you would like to ask any questions of the panelist. So, looks great. The numbers are rising here.
Yeah, they keep going up. Hi, everyone.
So excited to see everybody.
I think I should check. Now that I've got the Facebook Live going, I'm not sure if it is from your website or your Facebook or my Facebook.
Oh, that's a really good question. Either way, we'll have to just share it on the other. That's great.
Just so you know, I'm not entirely sure which one it is going from. But
it would be coming from yours.
Oh, that would make sense, right? Yeah.
Well, we'll find out. Someone can share it to the Sierra Club BC page and.
There you go.
Excellent. Well, welcome everybody.
Solve the problem.
We're having a few, technical issues this morning, but everything's going to work out okay. If you've just joined us, please open up the chat box. Make sure you select all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, you're just writing to us and the other people can't see what you're saying. So make sure you select all panelists, attendees, and please say your name and where you're calling from and the traditional territory if you know where you live, what the Indigenous people are from your location. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. We are going to record this. It's also streaming live on Facebook, although it may not be on the Sierra Club BC page. It could be on Julius's page. And we'll be using the chat box to communicate to each other. And the Q&A box is where you can ask questions of us or the panelists. So please go ahead and get your materials as well. So the materials you're going to need today are paper, pencils, an eraser, and pencil crayons or colored pencils. Julius recommends that we're going to use 2 different colors, one darker than the other, or 2 different weights or thicknesses, so that you can have different colors or textures. So hopefully all of you have those materials handy so that you can join along. So I'm going to introduce everybody really quickly. My name is Elizabeth Noble, and I'm the Manager of Donor Engagement at Sierra Club BC. I'm joined here with Sierra Da Silva, who is our Education Program Manager. And I'm really, really excited to introduce Dr. Julius Csotonyi, who is a Vancouver-based scientific illustrator and natural history fine artist with a scientific background. He holds a Master's of Science in Ecology and a PhD in Microbiology. His studies have taken him to study sensitive ecosystems from sand dunes in the Rocky Mountain Parks to hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean off the BC coast. These experiences have fueled a strong resolve to work towards preserving the Earth's biota. Painting biological subjects is one means that he uses to both enhance public awareness of biological diversity and to motivate concern for its welfare. He paints murals and panels that have appeared in numerous museums, including the Royal Tyrrell Museum and the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, as well as images for scientific publications, books, stamp sets, including the 2018 Sharks of Canada set for Canada Post, and coins for the Royal Canadian Mint. His work is viewable on his online gallery, which is at csotonyi.com. And maybe we can copy that and paste it into the chat box so that people can have access to that. So
Sure.
Julius, we are so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And Sierra, it's a great pleasure to be here. Always fun to be able to take part in your events with Sierra Club. And I'm just really excited to be able to do this live drawing session. So yeah, I'm in, I believe, let's see if we get the pronunciations right, in the Salish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh unceded territories, I think is where I'm in Vancouver here. And yeah, so I would like to just kind of briefly give you a quick example of some of the things that I do. So I'm just going to share my screen, and then we're going to get right into the drawing of the spotted owl. So we have here, I will just share this. Welcome everybody. And okay, so this is me. Yeah, this is basically it. What I do is I am a biologist by training and also a scientific illustrator or natural history artist. So I wear several different hats basically. Am a scientist by training, so I worked on deep ocean hydrothermal vents in the Pacific and on various other kinds of environments with interesting kinds of life forms, from really salty environments and also in sand dune environments and so on. So this has been very useful for me to both teach me how life on Earth functions and what it looks like and how it interacts with one type with another type, and also to give me an appreciation for the importance of life on Earth and the importance of us preserving it. I also create artwork for other scientists to help promote the science that they conduct in journal articles or press release images, like these ones here, for example. Some of them came out just recently. I work a lot on prehistoric animals and plants, but I also work with modern day animals and also create murals for museums. So a lot of these murals are either life-sized or almost life-sized. Some of them are even a little bit larger than life-sized. And had a lot of fun creating a bunch of murals for the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History in the last couple of years. And then I also illustrate books for children and adults, educational books on science, scientific subjects from prehistoric life to arthropods. I love sharks. I'm a huge fan of sharks. And so I just really enjoy illustrating them. And there's a book on whales that's just coming out that I did. So this is, again, there's one of the things I like is when the books have a strong conservation message in them. As Elizabeth mentioned, I also have done some stamp series like this one for Canada Post. And this one also had a nice, strong conservation message, which I really enjoyed. And my wife and I both illustrate coins as well for the Royal Canadian Mint. So this is something that I've found to be really enjoyable as well. I created a lot of coloring sheets for children and adults to help raise awareness about biodiversity and the threats that they face. And so these ones I have available on an album on my Facebook page, and then I'll make them available elsewhere as well. A lot of my work nowadays is painting animals and plants for conservation awareness purposes. That's and then I also paint.
Julius, I'm getting a notice that your sound is spotty.
Yep. Oh, is it really?
I'm
okay.
wondering if you could possibly turn off if you can turn off your video, maybe then it will be a little bit easier to hear you. Sometimes if we do two video streams, it goes a little bit lower res. So if you turn off your screen, as opposed to, you can keep sharing your screen, obviously, but if you turn off the video on you, it might help the sound quality.
Still like maybe stop the video on my.
Yes, there we go. So hopefully that will help.
Okay, good.
Sounds better to me.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for the heads up on that. Absolutely. We'll just kind of try troubleshoot as we go. So yeah, so this one is, I also do some painting for raising funds for conservation. And those include examples for earlier this year, I also did for Sierra Club. And also, one of the things that's really fun to do is to, as Sierra and Elizabeth are gonna share later on as well, to use artwork to help us to in our writing letters to politicians, to be able to include that with these letters, because it may be more impactful as well. So this is something else I found fun to do. Okay, so anyway, with that, so that gives you sort of an idea of what I do, and let's go right to drawing then. So I'm going to switch over and go to the right application. Stop screen sharing, and then I'm going to open up. And here we go. So what I'm going to do is I have a digital equipment set up that I can use to draw directly on, and oops, here we go. Let me just put this back up here so that you can see what I'm doing without having to worry about a camera to record this. So this is kind of what you'll be seeing. Hope everybody can see that okay. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to draw a northern spotted owl. And what I'd like to do is to start this drawing using sort of these guide shapes. So I'm going to use circles and triangles and so on to help us guide the shape that we're drawing, and then fill in the details afterwards. So what I'd like you to do is, if you have, say, a different color, let's say a lighter color, or if you want to draw more lightly initially, draw lightly with these first guide shapes that we're going to do. And I'm going to indicate that by, whoops, sorry. I'm going to indicate that using the red color on my screen. It doesn't have to be red. It's just that indicates the guide shapes. And then afterwards, for the details, I'll switch it into a black color of marker for me, and then you can use that to indicate that you should switch to either a darker color or a heavier line or whatever, so that those are the parts that you want to be more visible. Okay, so with that, we're going to start, and as I go, I'm going to be trying to I'll be sharing some information as well about the northern spotted owl, so we can kind of do this as a sort of a drawing and learning session. So it's a lot of fun to learn about these kinds of animals. I've just really enjoyed learning about the northern spotted owl. It's such a fascinating animal. So first of all, we're going to start with, this is set up for about an 8.5 by 11-inch page. And you can start by, we'll draw first kind of a circle right around here. So notice where I'm putting it on the page. It's kind of about a third of the way down from the top and about a third of the way in from the right. So it's basically a circle. And this is going to be what we're starting with for the head of the owl. Then we're going to add another shape, kind of an oval, starting from an edge of that circle, like this. So what we're going to try to do here is, I'm just going to erase that out a little bit, make it, so my computer sometimes does these big lines. So there we go. I'm going to start with an owl, and then we're going to put it into its sort of natural environment as well, and see if how much time we get to do that. And then Sarah and Elizabeth, if I'm looking close to running over, if you could kind of just let me know. Don't want to lose people's attention, but I think that we should be fine, but that would help. In the meantime, I'm going to continue with this owl. So this is the head and the body. Okay, perfect. That's good to know, actually, and that way we can keep on time. So this is going to be the head and the body of the owl to begin with. It doesn't look much like an owl yet, but it will. Now, inside of this first circle you did, we're going to make kind of a heart shape. So it'll go like this. And then at the bottom of the heart, there's also a little bit of a notch. I guess it's kind of like an apple. And join up to the top like that. And you notice that it's a little bit off center. It's more toward the left side so that the heart touches the circle on the left side. That's kind of the face of the owl, and owls have this face almost shaped like a satellite dish, and they actually, that's useful for them so that it helps them to hear better, actually. These feathers on their face are really effective in channeling sound as well. Now we're going to start to add the wings of the owl. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that we're going to make this owl not just kind of sitting on a branch, because, you know, that's something that's commonly done, but we want to make it an interesting looking image too. And I want to show how it's easy to do this. So we're putting the wings on it. You're going to take two sort of ellipses or oval shapes attached to that first oval. And like, here's one of them like this, top, kind of an angle like this. So this owl, and then the second one is underneath it like this. This owl, and notice they're only partial ovals. They're kind of, imagine it's behind the other ovals, like that. This owl is flying. It's actually just starting to fly off a branch, and you'll see what happens as we add more of these shapes. And the reason why it's kind of fun to do it this way rather than sitting on a branch is it shows us something about what the animal does and how it hunts. And it teaches us that we can all do you know, drawings that are more interesting than just, you know, something from a side view. So those were the base of the wings. Now we're going to add sort of the tips of the wings. These are guide shapes though, remember, it doesn't look quite like it yet. Now we're going to do an oval that's going to come out of like the bottom of the head there and through that last oval like this. The bigger oval. Pay attention to the size of the animal. I mean, you can, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly this size, but it's going to help to organize things on the page. Okay, that's one. And then the other wing is going to have a funny little sort of kind of like a teardrop shape on its side, maybe like a piece of lemon. I'm not sure what you describe it as. It goes like this. You go to the top oval, and I'm going to start a little narrow shape, a curve like that, and comes right back in toward it like that. Add a little bit more thickness to that line there. These are the tips of the wings, and it doesn't look like much yet. I understand that, but at the moment, we're trying to set up an owl that's launching off a branch, and so it's got its wings outstretched but starting to flap, and so we're seeing these wings from sort of a different angle, and you'll see what's happening as we add more details. The wings of the animal are actually interesting. They're short and broad, so they're wings that are kind of like on fighter aircraft that have to maneuver very with high agility, because this animal flies through the forest with lots of obstacles and it has to get around them to be able to hunt prey effectively. It's a predator, right? And so it needs to be able to fly very quickly in an agile way. Now we're going to add the tail of the owl, and it's kind of stretched out. So go to the bottom of that sort of central oval, and we're just going to make kind of a fan-like shape. It comes out like that. There's a rounded side like this, and then a bit of a corner, it comes back into the owl like that. There's the tail. And it's spread out its tail, and the tail is really useful for helping it to steer while it's flying. And it can spread out those feathers quite effectively too. Now we're going to add some legs to the owl, and this guy is just starting to fly, and so its legs are actually outstretched more than most owls' legs. So we're going to be able to see something that's unusual for owls, the fact that they actually have pretty long legs, and that's not usually very obvious, but when they start to launch, it is. So first of all, we're going to add a drumstick here. Kind of think of like a chicken drumstick, or just like basically, yeah, something like I guess a drumstick is the only shape that I can think of. It looks like two lines that look like this. Okay. That's one of the bases of the legs coming out of the body. And then the other leg is going to be a slightly different shape, coming out of the bottom of the body like this. So there's a curve, that, and then another curve, and this one coming from the bottom of the body like that. We have the base of the two legs of the animal, but we want to give it feet too. And then, so we're going to start with the right leg. The animal's right leg is on our left side, right? Because it's facing us here. You're going to start from the base, from the bottom of that shape you just drew, kind of the drumstick or the thigh, or sorry, not the thigh, actually the calves of the animal. And go down from there. It's sort of a longish line part of the way, and then a little bit of a hook shape at the bottom. It's going to be where its toes are. And go back up and join that shape again, like this. That is kind of the foot that's more in contact with the branch it's launching from. But it's got another foot as well, its left foot, and this one is a little bit raised. And so what you're going to see is this part of the foot is a little bit shorter than the one that we drew on the last one. Sorry, that was a little bit of a big shape. So you'll start from that leg and come down, and this one is just kind of ends in a bit of a curved point like that. So it looks kind of weird in this angle, but you'll see in a moment how this all fits together. The other thing here is now we're going to start to add the additional parts. And here we go. So we need to give it a couple of little claws, I guess, on the back of the foot. This will be more obvious after when we add the details, but you can add a bit of a toe on this one here, this right leg. And then the left leg also has a bit of a, this is called the hallux. It's the toe of birds that is on the sort of usually on the back of the foot. It helps them to grab onto branches. So it's kind of like our opposable thumb in that sense. And it really is kind of the equivalent of the thumb in its function. The last thing that we need for guide shapes is the face of the owl. So what you need to do is a couple of things. So first of all, do a very lightly kind of a dotted line. See where that apple shape is that we started? Make a little dotted line down the center. And then you want to take a couple of dotted lines from the two sort of upper extreme tips of the apple down toward the bottom center, kind of like this. Whoops, sorry, it was a bit thick line. Just light lines. These are just to guide you, one there. And then one from the left side on top down toward the center. These kind of help us to know where to put the parts of the owl, like the eyes, for example. And you can go right ahead and add, it has kind of these like eyebrow type, sorry, there it goes again. The computer does funny lines. Kind of eyebrow types of feathers like this. These aren't the eyes yet. These are some feathers it's got on its face. And there's a beak. And the beak is at the bottom of the face around here, like that. A little upside down teardrop shape. Okay. And now, of course, the eyes will be one here under that, one of those kind of an eyebrow-like feathers that we drew in. And the other eye is right here under that one. So now it's got two eyes. And you can see the way that the wings are held, you can see it's starting to kind of flap as it rises off the branch. But we need details on this animal, right? Because it kind of looks just like a bunch of shapes together. So that's the next part that we're going to do, is now I'd like you to switch to your darker color or a heavier line or ink if you have. Something that'll be more visible than those guide shapes that we just drew. And one thing that you can do if you want is maybe even partially erase out some of those lines just so that they're lighter. That's one thing that you could do. But either way, these next lines should be a bit darker. So we're going to add some feathers to the wings, and this way it'll help us to see what's actually happening here with this, the way that the animal is holding its wings. So first of all, we're gonna put the primary feathers. These feathers help the owl to fly. They're the big long ones at the ends of the wings, and there are about 10 of them. So with that big round oval that you drew on the owl's right wing, or the farthest left shape, we're going to start near the top like this, and oopsie, sorry, start that again here. We're going to use the edge, follow the edge partly, then stop, and then go back in. So these are going to be individual feathers, and you notice how we're using the tip, the edge of that guide shape to basically corral in where we're putting those feathers. Just follow along. There's about 10 of them, I think, for the primary feathers. And there are just a bunch of, whoops, my computer did a funny little extra line there. That's not necessary. Here we go. I'll just redo that one. So owls have these, and birds in general, have these feathers that are shaped a particular way. They're actually shaped a little bit like an airplane wing. And that's so that they can have lift, that they can guide air around them so that they can fly effectively. There we go. And then there are these little feathers, these covert feathers, kind of come like this. These help to kind of cover the inside of the bottom of the wing. And the other thing here is that now we've got these big primary feathers. There's one more little feather called an alula that happens on top. Right on top of this shape, you add this little spike-like thing, and it's a very small feather. Continue the line along the wing toward the head like that. The reason for that feather, it's this one here, I'm just pointing out, is that it is helping the animal to be able to fly at low speeds without stalling, and so that they don't fall out of the sky. And that's effective and important for an animal that has to fly through the forest and change direction quickly and fly at slower speeds as it hunts. And so it's really neat that these guys have it. And it's actually a leftover from their lineage, from how they evolved from dinosaurs. And this was the kind of like the animal's thumb. This is an additional finger that those feathers are on, that little alula. So it's kind of neat to see that they have effectively two sort of functional fingers still. Now we're going to add feathers onto the other wing, these same primaries, but now the way that these are going to be is they're kind of turned toward us. And so we're not seeing these face on, but kind of a little bit at an edge. And so that's why we added that weird kind of teardrop shape the first time for this tip of the left wing. So what you're going to do is go to the top of that sort of teardrop shape on top and trace out similar kind of feathers like this, starting there. Actually, sorry, let me back up a second. We're going to start from the bottom, from the right side, and go leftward instead of from the left to the right. And the reason for that has to do with the way the feathers overlap. So go to the top and the right side of this shape, and then we'll start drawing like this. Feather here, and then another feather here, and then down here. And we're again using this shape to sort of corral in or provide sort of a fence for where we're putting the feathers so that we don't go beyond the edges. And like I said, it has to do with why, with how the feathers overlap. And birds that fly have feathers that overlap forward on the top of the wings. So in other words, the fronts of the feathers are visible from when viewed from above, and then when viewed from below, it's those trailing edges of the feathers that are visible and that overlap first. Okay, and then we'll just continue, close off this wing on top like that. Those are the tips of those primary feathers, the main flight feathers. Now we're going to go back to the other wing and add a few of these what are called secondary feathers using that smaller oval. So like this, just basically add some of these lines overlapping, kind of like shingles on a roof, just within the line of that oval, like that. We're going to do the same thing for the other wing and just kind of add these little feathers along this oval here. Just sort of part of the way into that oval. And they kind of overlap like that. And they kind of get toward the end of the toward the body like this. And the last thing is we want to complete that wing as well. So go to the very top of that same oval that we were just working inside of, and then close it off like that toward the animal's body, like that. Okay, so we've got the wings in place. And at this point, we're going to add the tail feathers. And to do that, actually, you know what? Maybe it'd be easier to do the legs first so that we don't do the tail feathers over top of the legs. So let's just basically follow the lines you did for the legs already. Kind of those drumsticks and then down. And at the tip of the toes, we're going to add a few toes. So just add these little lines that go in from that curve at the bottom like that. That just goes to show that they have 3 toes there in the front. And then I mentioned there was that hallux, or the back toe is kind of like a thumb. So I'm just going to trace over it like that. So that is the animal's left leg. Now the right leg comes out of the body as well, like this. Basically, we're just following that same guideline that we drew initially. But at the foot, we can add a few toes that curl and sort of a couple of claws. Like that. Oops, I made a wee bit of a mistake there. One claw here, and then the other claw's down here. But, you know, if you did it the other way, that's fine too, because they can bend their feet in different ways. These claws are really effective for hunting the mammals that they hunt a lot. They are forest birds, so that they encounter a lot of forest mammals. And one of the things that they hunt a lot is the northern flying squirrel. There's a leg. And that's important because these owls need to have access to these particular kinds of animals to hunt. And northern flying squirrels nest in holes left by woodpeckers as one of the major ways that they nest. Now, woodpeckers are more common in old growth forest, or these forests that have matured, that are hundreds of years old often. And so because of that, they need old growth forest. And because the owl's prey needs old growth forest, the owls typically are found more in old growth forest as well. So this is kind of how they all interconnect. They need these special environments to survive. And so now we're going to add the tail feathers to the owl. Basically, we're going to follow that same kind of tail that we drew, but we're going to add extra feathers in from the edge like this. They can overlap. And then don't draw through the legs, just kind of stop when it hits the legs, right? And then start from the other side from outside of the leg, is what I'm saying. So we don't put the feathers through the leg. Okay, and then there's a couple of lines in between the legs there to denote those feathers. And then finish off the tail like that. The last thing that we need on this owl is the body. So we're going to add the lines around the body. Basically, just follow the line that you already set up, starting at the top of the head like this. Go around the head, the same round shape. But at where you get to the body, just continue along the body of the owl toward the leg. And you can actually draw through that leg and stop here at the animal's left leg on our right side. You can put a little dotted line here at the base of that wing that is stretched toward us, kind of. There's not as much of a sharp line there. At the right side of the head there, just put a very light dotted line to show where the head kind of ends there. And now, remember there's that sort of apple or heart shape for the face? You can kind of add a line to trace that as well. So that's going to be part of that's where those facial feathers end, and that kind of is important to show on the owl. And the last couple of things are we need to finish up the, again, put in heavier line the beak that we drew, same shape. And the eyes, again, same shape as we already did. These are circles. The one on our left side can be a little bit more of an oval. You actually fill these in too, because they have very dark eyes. You can actually see their pupils if you look closely, but not necessarily from a distance. They look black. And then those little eyebrow, whoops, there, my computer did a big spot again. Those little eyebrow type of feathers kind of come like this, and it's a little bit of a jagged edge. You know what? I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so that you can see this a little bit better. I will reposition it. This way we get to see a little bit better what's happening. And those are the little eyebrow type of feathers here. And then around the face, we have, there's kind of a funny little mustache-like thing that comes out like this on both sides of the beak. And then there's kind of a jaggedy line between the eyes coming up from the beak where those feathers meet as well. And if you want, we can also add, now there are some color patterns that are characteristic of this owl, and then we'll just lightly add those in. There are a couple of very light little arcs or sort of half circles on the face, sort of surround the eyes. But what gives this owl its name, is the northern spotted owl, is that there are spots on the top of the head and on the back. And these are going to be little spots. So right on top here, you can add a few spots on top of its head. These are actually normally white. So I'm using a bit of a thicker pen here, so it's harder to make them into white spots, but know that it's brown on the bottom, on the base, and these spots are white. The other thing that this owl has is these large, broad spots on the body. So you can see where I'm starting to add these spots. They kind of follow the contour of the owl's body. And so you can see how they change direction. And there's a bunch of these. They're kind of bars. Speaking of which, these are different from the bars on what's called the barred owl, which also shares the range of the spotted owl. Those ones have more vertical lines, not horizontal spots. And the barred owl is actually one species that this animal has to compete with for space for nesting and such and food. And so that's another one of the threats that it has. The main threat the animal faces, though, is from logging and just habitat destruction as we invade its habitat. And so we have to take great care to try to preserve this species and protect it from destruction of its habitat, because it needs that to survive. Okay, so there's the owl. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten those guidelines. What you can do is, if you want to erase out some of those, what's in red here is those guidelines, you can do that if you're careful not to erase the line that you just did. But you can leave them there as well if you want. But here's what it looks like if I lighten those lines a bit. So now you can see that that dark line that we drew last really shows the owl quite nicely, and it's showing it launching from a branch. To do that, we can draw in the branch really quickly here. And I'm going to stay in the, sort of the black marker. I'm just going to zoom out one more so we see the whole page. So it's launching from this branch here, which is just below its foot. Draw any shape or branch you want, but I've set up one that looks like this, coming off a tree, and they live in these coniferous forests that are dominated by the Douglas fir and other large conifers. And in this forest, there are other trees, and so we can just add a few trees, and that's really easy. We just draw these kind of pairs of vertical lines, and so for example, and maybe even little knobs of branches that have broken off, partly like this, one line, and then another line like this. So that represents one trunk. And you're only seeing parts of trunks because they're hidden partially by branches as well. So here's another one on the right side, big long line. and then maybe we can have like a branch coming off. These are huge, huge conifers. And in old growth forests, these are hundreds of years old sometimes. And if you've ever gone through some of the wonderful old growth forest in BC, you'll see that they are huge, these trees. Some of them can be wider than like several people holding their arms side by side. You can also add some branches of other trees, for example, like this. You can just represent those by these jagged lines. Yeah, different ways. We're just kind of making an environment for the animal so that it can fly around in this environment by making a few branches of trees. And this is a very complex environment in which it lives. That's part of the reason why it's so important that they have this wonderful old growth forests, because it tends to nest better in places where there are lots of nests left over by other species, such as other owls or eagles. It uses nests, it doesn't build its own. And so having a complex environment is important because it allows many species to survive and to have nesting space available for this animal. Okay. And we could add, for example, a few, if you wanted to add a few trees in the distance, you can add a few more of these pairs of lines to represent trunks. It's up to you however many you want to add. You can make this go however way you like. And then we're going to add a larger branch in the foreground. And this one is jagged because it's covered in moss. So kind of like this coming down the side. This is in a rainforest here. The northern spotted owl, and there are 3 subspecies. There are some that live in California as well, and some in Mexico. This one lives along the coast, along the north from BC down to the north of California. And so these rainforests are often very wet. So you get a lot of moss growing on the branches of the trees. Now the last thing that we want to add here, I'm not sure, how are we doing for time? Can I add a squirrel in there?
Yeah, we are now at 11:44, so I think you have time for a squirrel.
Okay, real quick then. Let's just do a quick little flying squirrel, and this is just a few shapes, kind of like the owl, but it's going to be simpler than the owl. I want to show this because it shows one of the prey that the owl hunts, and so we have the owl turned toward it, because owls have these long eyes. They're really unusual for animals. Did you know that an owl actually can't rotate its eyes in its eye sockets because they're fixed in place? And so it has to do with how they can be used basically as telescopes. And so they have to turn their whole head. So that's why we've got the head turned toward this flying squirrel. And the way we're going to do that is shift again to your light colored pen or pencil or colored pencil. I'm going to do this again with the red and start by, I'm going to bring up this guide to full brightness. We're going to make the animal just kind of in front of the owl, but it's much closer to us than the owl, so he's just kind of looking at it. Start with this kind of a rounded triangle right around here, like that. It's kind of wonky, but that's okay, it's close. Now we're going to add, this is neat. I'm not sure if a lot of people know about the fact that there are these flying squirrels. Not all squirrels only travel along trees. Some of them can glide. And this one, the northern flying squirrel, is one of them. It glides at night, which is also when the owl feeds, so they're both nocturnal. They try to avoid predators this way, but they still have, the squirrel still has the owl to contend with. This next shape is kind of like, what's like a shreddy cereal sort of a thing. It's kind of hard to describe it. It's a kind of like a square or a rectangle with the sides pushed in, like that. What you're looking at there is that first little small shape was the animal's head. Basically, it's a guide shape again. The second one is the animal's body and legs spread out, and it's got this membrane between its legs, kind of a flat sheet of skin that it can then stretch out and use as wings, basically, to allow it to glide. And then the tail comes out of the back. This kind of like a partial sort of banana shape, or like a jelly bean. And it uses its tail for steering and also to help it to glide. Then you can add little feet, and the feet are at kind of the hind feet are at the tips of this flight membrane, kind of like this one. And the other one is on the other side like this, just little knobs. The front feet are actually further in from the end, kind of like here, one there and one here. Small little shapes. And then it's got these ears on top of its head. Again, that small shape that we drew before. That one, then the other ears on the other side like that. And then it's got eyes. These guys have big eyes for small animals. One there and one here. And a little nose at the tip like that. And kind of almost like a cat-like mouth area like that. So I'm just going to clean up that left. There. And then you can also represent where draw in where the arms and the legs are with little lines. Oops, littler lines than that. That's a big one. Kind of connect the feet to the animal's body, kind of like this. And then the hind legs come up. These are light lines. The body is just kind of a little furry bit like that in the center. So it's kind of spread out, right? The legs are all spread out, and there's this skin between the arms and legs that helps it to glide. And then just to add a few details, switch to your darkest pencil or pen, just like for the owl. And we're just going to basically follow along these shapes to outline it, and then you can like partially erase out the parts that in that guide shapes. But it's really pretty much the same thing. So we're just going to follow along the edge, like with the ear here, for example, the darker color, finish the head in between it. You've already got these guide shapes, so you're basically just following them along to show its head. You can fill in the eyes, because again, these guys have very dark looking eyes, really beautiful, like little jewels. And then the nose, and the mouth where we drew it. Then the flight membrane, it's called a patagium actually, between the arms and legs. And then the little foot. And then this membrane comes up to the body and continues out to the other side. There's another foot here. You can add little tiny toes if you want. Finish it like that. And here we go. And then the last little bits are the little hands. You can add a few fingers. And finally, the tail. And the tail, actually, you can make a jagged edge to show that it's got long fur on the tail. In the center line. Little bits of fur where the legs were, you already drew that in. And there we go. So that's basically the shape of the flying squirrel, kind of leaping also from branch to branch, and the owl starting to pursue it. I'm going to make this into a separate shape. But basically, that is how you draw the flying squirrel and the owl and its environment. This goes to show that they're all living together and they need this environment in which to live. It's very important for these ecosystems to have this complexity for them to be able to survive. And that's why it's very important for us to be able to do what we can to preserve these ecosystems so that they're around for many, many years to come. And we don't want to destroy them as this old growth forest is very much at risk of being logged instead of the secondary forest. And that this is something that needs work to be done to prevent this from happening. I think there we have pretty much the drawing finished. And you can add environmental details as you like, but that gives us the general idea of the owl hunting its prey. And I'm going to shift back to the stop screen sharing and turn on the video.
That's so great, Julius. Thank you so much for guiding us through that. I'm really, really excited. And I hope that we all can actually share our drawings. It would be really fun
Great.
to do a gallery of that later. So if
And
everyone
I
wants
can
to send
actually,
me.
yeah, and I'll send you mine, and I'll try to put a little more detail into it so that people can see what it looks like if I've kind of spruced up some of the lines to work with, and maybe even add a little bit of color sort of thing. So I'll send
That
that
would
to
be
you guys.
great. And maybe also, if you could also just share the guides, so you
Yes,
could
absolutely.
have both of those, that would be really helpful.
For sure, I'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Very cool how the guide shapes just work to help you when you're drawing all of these complex shapes.
And this is the nice thing that actually it's something that a lot of books use as to show how to draw, but professional artists do this in our minds all the time anyway. When we look at something to draw it, we try to break it down into as many simple shapes as possible, because it's easier for our minds to comprehend simple shapes and then put a drawing together from those, rather than try to see the whole thing and draw it at once. So it really helps at all stages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's terrific. So we have a couple of questions for you. Well, the first one is, do you paint for sets, like for Jurassic Park movies or anything like that?
Good point. I've not worked with many movie companies. I have done dinosaurs for the Jurassic Park website. And so I've done a series of those ones. So yeah, but I don't work a lot with movies in general. I have also done some work for documentaries before on dinosaurs. But that's the whole area that I haven't done a lot with yet, but it would be fun to do. I really enjoy working with scientists a lot. Having been a scientist and speaking the same language, I love to work on scientific stuff, but movies are fun as well.
That's great. How long have you been drawing for?
Well, I've been working on this all my life. So I did my very first drawings when I was 3. I think my mom still has that drawing. So I've had this as a hobby my whole life, but I started working professionally about 2005. So it's been 15 years now that I've been working on books and museums and scientific publications.
That's great. And we have a question. Was the squirrel called a sugar glider?
Good question. That's a good question. Actually, no, that's an Australian species, and the sugar gliders, I think, are marsupials. That's a good example of animals that undergo what's called evolutionary convergence, and so they evolved to look similar because the pressures of their environment act similarly on them, even though they're not related to each other closely. So these are what are called eutherians, or placental mammals. The flying squirrels are like, they're more closely related to like the red squirrels, the gray squirrels, but they have evolved this special gliding membrane between their legs, because then they can leap from tree to tree as well, and they can glide really well. I saw this happen once in life, and it's just amazing to see these things just leap off something and then glide. But they're not sugar gliders. That's a whole other group, but they look so nice. Fascinating.
That's really helpful, and that's so neat to learn about the evolutionary convergence. Yes, we're going to get a recording sent to you. We'll also include Julius's guide and his drawing as well. I also hope that you'll send your drawings to me. I'll type my email address, which is gifts@sierraclub.bc.ca. And if you can email your drawings, then we can put a little gallery up.
Fun to see.
How did you get into doing scientific art after doing biology?
Yeah, it's a good question. I got into it basically during my PhD. So it was an interesting time when I was doing lab work in microbiology during the daytime. Then in the evening, I would come home and I would illustrate for books. I got contacted by a publishing company for author Dougal Dixon to do work on a dinosaur encyclopedia. And from then on, it just kind of spiraled upward. And I bid on projects for museums and won several of the bids to do exhibit murals. And there was a lot of sort of other people seeing what I've done for previous museums and other scientists, and then asking me to do the same. I also go to scientific conferences to interact with scientists and make contacts there as well.
Excellent. And so where can I find your art? That's at csotonyi.com. Yeah, maybe let's type that back in the chat so
Sure,
that we
sure.
can have that there
And
again.
then
And we'll also, you know, send that a link to that after this is
sure.
done.
I also
And
have a
then,
bunch of coloring sheets on an album on my Facebook page, so that's available for people freely to color in a bunch of different species. So
wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And then we have another minute. So if you wanted to pursue scientific illustration, are there any courses that you can suggest?
that's not something that I've done a lot of. I'm mostly self-taught, so there are some wonderful courses online though. Uh, James Gurney, painter, does some beautiful work, and he has some really good programs as well. And he's an excellent illustrator. That's one to look for, and there's lots of others though too.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Sierra really quickly before we go.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that and for sharing all your passionate ability as well as the information about the owl. So this is the northern spotted owl that we were drawing, and in BC there are only an estimated 6 individuals in the wild, which is tragic, and that's due to old growth logging in the most part. And there are some successful breeding programs that are going on. So actually 1 week ago today, a baby northern spotted owl was born at a breeding facility in Langley, and that gives us hope. But unfortunately, the wild habitat in which these creatures live is under threat, and most of the old growth forest in BC is not protected. As much as we would think that we've made progress in protecting a lot of forests, very little is still protected outside of the Great Bear Rainforest. So we really encourage people to think about how communicating with politicians and expressing a desire to have more old growth forest protected. We think that's key. This isn't the only endangered species within old growth forests in BC. So there's also the northern goshawk and many more that are under threat from old growth logging. So we encourage you, as well as sending an image of your drawing to Elizabeth, to include a photo of your image with a letter to politicians. You can either scan that and email it, or you can mail it in as a letter. And you can also call government to tell them what your views are on old growth logging. And the old growth forest species that are living in there, they're under threat, and they can only exist within the complex ecosystem of old growth forests. So once those are logged and once they become secondary forests, those habitats will never return to be as we know them today. And so we're going to be sending information along about how to contact politicians here in BC in the follow-up email with the recording. And think about that in the next while before you write what you're going to say in your letter, because there's a lot that you could say, and a lot depending on where you live in BC that will be relevant. And so something to think about. If 6 of these are remaining in the wild, that's almost nothing, and we really have to act now to protect that remaining habitat. Thank you so much for drawing today, and I know I've got more details to add to my drawing, but that was a lot of fun. And thank you everyone for joining us on this webinar, and for the comments, the enthusiastic comments in the sidebar there. It's been a pleasure, and we hope that everyone's going to take some action using this drawing as inspiration for protecting the northern spotted owl.
Right on. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for having me on this show. It's been a lot of fun to do this.
Great.
Thank you so
much. Thank you. And just as a quick point of note, Sierra Club is always happy to offer these webinars for free, but we do rely on donations. And so if you enjoyed this today and you're inspired to do so, please feel free to sign up for a donation. We always encourage people to give a small monthly gift, especially right now. Your financial contributions are definitely needed. And you can do so easily at sierraclub.bc.ca. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day.